So, Wish World. Wow. Just wow. I have been a huge proponent of this entire season. I've loved the entire season. I thought most episodes are a complete banger. This one's a bit of a mess. We all saw the reveals. We all saw the chaos. But did you catch that one tiny detail hidden in plain sight that might just explain not only the Ronnie's true master plan, no pun intended, but also why the teased return feels, well, a bit off so far. Stick around, because by the end of this review, I'm going to point out something that made me rethink this entire setup. It's not what you think, and it's definitely not what Mrs. Know-It-All was gushing about. What's up, my know-it-alls? All right, so let's get into the non-spoiler stuff first. So before we jump into the deep, here's sort of a really quick spoiler-free rundown of Wish World. The Doctor and his companion, in this case seemingly Belinda, wake up in a bizarre, idyllic, yet deeply unsettling alternate reality. Think picture-perfect suburbia, but with an oppressive, conformist undertone. People who doubt this reality face strange consequences, and Conrad Clark seems to be the architect or mouthpiece of this strange new world. The Doctor, with no memory of his true self, navigates this wish world, trying to piece together just what's wrong. While familiar faces pop up in unexpected roles, it's a classic "something's not right here" setup that quickly escalates as the true nature of this reality and the powers behind it begin to unravel, leading to a cliffhanger that seemingly sets up a massive confrontation. All right, cool. All that having been said, big spoiler warning. You've been warned. From this point on, we're going to dive headfirst into full spoiler territory. It's what I do.
Now stop.
If you haven't seen Wish World yet, hit pause, go watch it on Disney Plus or whatever, or on BBC iPlayer, and then come right back, because we definitely need to talk. Let's break it down. Wish World threw a lot at us. Here are just a few of some of the key things that kind of stood out for me for this analysis. The overall aesthetic, I don't have a problem with. It's very 1950s Americana mixed with sinister. I think that's literally the only way I can call it. The consequences of doubt, I think, is an interesting play. That whole shattering mug thing. The fact that every single garbage outside says slip on it, because that's how frequent this thing is. I know that I mentioned last week the idea that, social commentary and everything else had been, and I've been sort of seeing more and more and more, because again, I remember I've been watching this whole thing back through since the beginning of season 2. I'm watching the various episodes again, because again, I love this season. I think the season's really, really good. So I was kind of looking forward to an RTD classic two-parter. By that, I mean, he's done a lot of really good two-parters that I've liked. At least from my perspective, I've enjoyed two-parters in the past, the way they had always been presented. This, I was hoping, was going to be something like that or akin to that. And it really wasn't, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. The social commentary that's woven in, it's sort of a critique. Now that I'm seeing it, it's sort of a critique of conformity, which is, I guess, traditional values, for lack of a better way to put it, and sort of the suppression of individuality, which, I mean, okay, I guess. That I understand the message and I got the thing. I don't know exactly how I feel about it, or if I agree necessarily with the sentiment, but at the same time, but I do understand where it's coming from. Conrad Clark, his role as the apparent controller / narrator of this reality, his connection to the Wish baby, which again I will revisit. The pacing, I think, for me, of the Doctor regaining his memories and understanding sort of that they're in a fake reality. I don't know why that took so long. I felt like the more, especially, I felt like the minute he began to recognize Ruby in the door.
Oh, please, I didn't mean to just...
Did you say Ruby?
That should have been sort of the tipping point. And instead, they hold on longer and longer and longer and longer. And I felt like it was just kind of giving us an excuse for the whole exposition dump of everything. Not to mention the fact that when you're jumping back and forth between him and other things, I want to see what's going on with him. But instead, we get this whole detour that starts out the thing with the Wish Baby. So let's talk about the Wish Baby for a second. What? No, really. What? I feel like the entire gods and pantheon aspect has been lost. I feel like Russell wanted to go into this season and he was very excited about, we're going to go in places where it's more about mythology and more magic and all these things, sort of things you didn't normally associate with Doctor Who and all this. Great. And we started there. But then we kept going back to that particular well and it kept drying up as far as I was concerned. I thought the last season, fine, whatever. And then this season, touching on it as much as often as we did. But then to come to like, how do you go from having these pantheon of chaos people, whoever they are, start as something important, but then ultimately become the MacGuffin at the end? Part of my frustration is that I am very disappointed because this has been such an amazing season. And again, I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But yeah, so then you get into this whole idea that the Doctor's remembering things and whatnot. Unit is a insurance company in Wishworld, and apparently the Doctor works there. And the Doctor begins to show proclivities outside of what is considered the norm in this world, I guess, in Conrad's world, which I feel like, I don't know. I guess that it felt like a ham-fisted message, though I guess, again, I do understand and see it. Getting back to this whole, I can't get past the mechanics of how Wishworld is ultimately supposed to be, was created and then ultimately sustained. The Wish Baby, Desiderium, as we've talked about briefly, sort of and then ultimately the Ronnie's tech, which I don't understand. And we'll get into the Ronnie of it all shortly. I feel like there's a world in which, like, how do those, normally when Russell does something like this, where he just dumps you into a world that is established, you get more. And we didn't get much more. Everything felt very in your face and very explain. And I don't know why he felt like he feels like the audience is that dumb. Like we have to be talked to. He's never had to talk down to us before. And now someone did make the comment last week. Wonderful comment, by the way. I believe I know it all. I certified it as know it all certified. Which with the comment was essentially what boiled down to was, when it comes to the messaging, maybe it's because subtle messaging hasn't worked or hasn't been a part of the thing or wasn't accepted, something to that effect. But ultimately, more overt messaging is maybe the Russell T Davies RTD felt was necessary. Okay. I'm willing to go with you down that road, but I feel like ultimately to what end? Because I know that like has been stated numerous times in many other places, Doctor Who's had plenty of messaging throughout it's all of it, everything from acceptance to peace and the making the world better and whatever, global warming, global cooling, global everything, whatever. My point is, it's always had some sort of messaging. I know that, but it's never felt as ham-fisted as it does right now. And understand, I'm not even talking about overt. I'm talking about ham-fisted. What's the difference? Overt messaging is someone holding up a sign, blah, 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 whatever else. Ham-fisted is someone holding up a sign and then someone else having to say, wow, look, that person's holding up a sign. I guess they must mean blah, 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 blah. And then you have an exchange that is literally spelling out the whole message. That's ham-fisted. And that's where I feel we are now. I don't mind messaging. I'm a Star Trek fan. Trust me. I'm not like these deniers out there who are like, get politics and messaging out of my stories. Look, that's a part of storytelling. It's functionally, I would argue, why stories exist, which is to discuss and discourse through fiction the events and things of the world, the time we live in. To let some people be seen or heard, or ideas and viewpoints explored through the lens of fiction, so that because you can distance yourself from it and go, huh, that's an interesting idea. I think I can, let me wrap my brain around that. Okay, it's not unheard of. I'm just used to them doing it a little better. Just me. Ultimately, the episode functions sort of, its function is set up for a 2-part finale. was really clunky, especially for, you know, how much was dedicated to establishing the new reality versus moving the overarching plot forward? That's the big question. Because it wasn't like there was so much. Part of what I think would have helped is if they took the opportunity to you just dive us in and then move forward. The problem is they dive us in and then sit there and they sit there and they sit there and we see Ruby and we see the doctor and everything sits there and we finally get to meet Conrad and we see the whole backstory and the baby and the whole thing. They had to introduce a lot of moving parts here just to take us. This is the penultimate episode. We shouldn't be getting new elements introduced or having things set up for us. Now, mind you, I know that I've said it before, and again, if you're any kind of fan of this channel, if you're part of the Know It All Nation, you understand we know what a penultimate episode is. Penultimate episode serves two purposes. The first is to set up the finale, whatever that is, and this more or less does that, if clunky, if ham-fisted. The other thing that a penultimate should do is either A, come to a climax itself, and then set up the resolution, which will be in the next part or the next episode. Okay? That's more in line with like a Game of Thrones or something along those lines. You see the big action thing happen in the penultimate, and then ultimately the last episode is the last episode, and it resolves and wraps things up. I don't think we're there. I think we're definitely in the first situation, which is they've tried to set up enough stuff to now take us into what should be the finale, big raucous climactic finale, regardless of how this episode ended. Okay. And I feel like that's a big part of it. I think the visual style, it's the contrast between sort of that bright artificial world. It's very Truman Show. You know what I mean? And then sort of the underlying menace that's there, including all those giant bone creatures, which I'll be honest, I didn't understand at all. Wonderful, fantastical things to see, but none of it's explained in any way meaningful way. None of it says anything to me that says, okay, this is why this is here. A lot of question marks. And I normally am okay with going along with the ride with some of these things, but I don't know, man. It felt a lot of questions, not enough answers. I liked the use of doubt as a literal weapon or a key to sort of breaking the illusion, but then ultimately flipping that idea on its head because that's what they want, the Ronnies. So that was interesting. So, all right. That's about as close as I'm going to get some of these and analyzing these things. But I think ultimately, let's look at some of the character performances. Ncuti Gatwa is meh in this. He's basically still the same as he's always with the Doctor himself. You know, though I'm coming very quickly to the conclusion that this version of the Doctor is just Ncuti Gatwa as like the Doctor regenerated into the actor Ncuti Gatwa. Because that's what I'm finding. More and more and more. There are things I see, like him getting angry last week was wonderful, and seeing that face, the anger of the Time Lord, everything else. I'm getting frustrated. And the fact is, when he's husband, John Smith, I didn't believe it. I didn't believe him. I didn't believe it at all. It felt like acting. It felt put on, the whole thing. You then switch over to Virata Sethu. She's honestly way too good for this show. I don't know if it's a hot take or not. I've seen her in Andor. I've seen her in several other things now. And as an actress, she's definitely standing out head and shoulders above everybody else. Belinda as a character really got a chance to shine here. Sort of navigating the creepy perfection, Stepford wifiness of it all. And then ultimately that sort of dawning horror on her. But Virata Sethu breathes life into this character, especially during the emotional upheaval times. That part when she goes out of her house, whatever, runs to the countryside and shouts to this and screams in frustration, and it's like this weird impotent frustration. I dug that moment. I believed that moment. Virata Sethu has owned this character in a way that I don't think the character of Ruby Sunday has been owned by Millie Gibson. I definitely don't think Ncuti Gatwa has owned this Doctor to this point. It's getting frustrating, that's all. Because again, I've loved this season, so I don't really understand it. I don't know why we needed a cameo of any kind when it comes to the character that the Doctor ran into long ago, and he's left in like a hell dimension. I didn't understand that incorporation at all. It just, what? I'm glad to see the character, but it didn't, again, make much sense to me. Other than for him to sit here and give the notes, tables don't do that. I guess. I don't know. Archie Punjabi is as the newly revealed Ronnie. She's definitely bringing theatrical menace. I'll say that. She's clearly enjoying this villain role. Anita Dobson is Mrs. Flood. now also Ronnie. The dynamic between the two of them, it's something. I'm not going to say if it's great or not, but it's something. And I don't know that I'm a huge fan of what it is. Mainly because the Ronnie feels way mischaracterized. And I think actually, you know what? I'm going to save that. I will talk more about that in a minute. But I don't want to get too lost in all those particular weeds. So some of the big reveals, I say big reveals, but they're not really that big, obviously, because I feel like we all saw Conrad telegraphed as being involved somewhat in this episode and ultimately the finale. But he wasn't the third part of their trinity, if you will. So, but he's sort of instrumental in shaping and maintaining this false reality using the Wish baby's powers. Okay. Sure. The Ronnie or Ronnies, if you will, the ultimate goal in creating sort of this really elaborate illusion in order to use the Doctor's doubt to shatter reality and both find and release Omega? Okay. I don't know. I feel like the reveal of Omega was about as lackluster as I thought the reveal of the Ronnie was. And it should have been more exciting. They used that really great Big Finish audio because obviously, and I thought that was cool, you know, but we've also heard the actor who like, he literally played the voice of Sutek and some other, like the guy who plays Omega, the voice of Omega, has been in Doctor Who for quite some time playing other voices and whatnot. And it's interesting to see. I remember the episode very clearly. I've actually seen, this is one I've seen. I like Omega. I like the character of Omega. I don't know how you reconcile the story of Omega with the new history that they have retconned and built into the Doctor. Talking about the timeless child, talking about those elements. I'm not arguing against those elements. Please don't get it confused. What I'm saying is I'm trying to understand how you marry these two concepts. And so that is one that I found confusing, but at the same time, I'm like, all right, whatever. So definitely Omega is confirmed as the one who is lost, the ancient Time Lord engineer. The Ronnie is apparently seeking. And then we get some weird suggestion of a romantic relationship between the Doctor and the Ronnie. No. I mean, I don't know. She's always been super amoral. It's always just been about the science and the stuff. And I think it's weird that their idea that they've had a romantic relationship of any kind at any point, it feels awkward, if not, again, like everything else I'm describing this, ham-fisted. So some criticisms I've got, because I haven't given enough already. Way too many plot threads and characters. The episode felt super overstuffed. I mean, in short, you have two Ronnies, an Omega, a Wish baby, Conrad, the entire cast of Unit, not to mention Ruby's mystery and Belinda and her family's ultimate role, and then of course the Doctor himself and everything he's going through. Wow, there's a lot happening here in this episode. The Ronnie's motivations and plan feel really overcomplicated, and I think for me, it's more of a departure from her classic characterization. Now, why do I say that? Considering last week I just said, who is the Ronnie? I did some homework. Didn't have to do much because the BBC put out a video showing the Ronnie's highlights. It's a wonderful video. It's actually like 17 minutes long. And it basically shows every scene she was in throughout most of this stuff. And if you do some reading online, you can actually get a pretty good comprehensive idea of who the Ronnie is, because I wanted to understand better going into this finale who she was, especially after the lackluster intro we got to her character. So you get this she's super overcomplicated. She's always been considered or drawn up as an amoral, pure scientist with no interest in domination of any kind. This version, she comes across as Missy 2.0. Like, I really don't see a difference between her and the Master. I really don't. Not in how they're being portrayed. And the Ronnie's never been considered evil, though a lot of her actions have put her at odds with the Doctor. I've never considered her to be a Doctor's adversary. I feel like there's been times that her and the Doctor have been adversarial, but again, I guess that's just my interpretation of the whole thing. The Omega reveal, while significant for sort of longtime fans, and then why wouldn't it be? It felt a little bit rushed and really super info dumpy, like in its execution. And I don't know why we needed that. And I feel like it's just, I don't know. The Wish baby, Desiderium, feels like a convenient MacGuffin, like I mentioned before. Because ultimately, the only reason that the god creature thing exists is for the Ronnie's plan, which again feels convoluted and sort of over the top. You know, and ultimately for a show that's supposed to be pulling in new viewers, it really seems to lean heavy on sort of that established lore and in ways that like it didn't do before. Okay, so here's my final take, really. Westworld for me is a mess, even by RTD sometimes wonderfully chaotic standards. As the first part of a two-parter finale, it felt like the weakest setup I've experienced from him yet. There's really so many moving parts and so many threads being juggled, and it feels a bit frantic. Now, I know some people, like Mrs. Know-It-All, absolutely loved it and were buzzing about the reveals. She was excited for me to explain what it all meant and sort of, you know, look at the ambition that's all here. I'll give it that for sure. It's definitely ambitious, for sure, without a doubt. Omega, a legendary villain whose impending return feels really lackluster, almost overshadowed by the sheer noise of everything else that's happening right now. Okay, so what's the tiny detail I mentioned at the start? Well, it's how the Ronnie talks about needing the Doctor's doubt to shatter reality to find Omega. Okay? Why Omega? Other than the fan service aspect, which I do believe is what RTD is leaning into. You know, because for years everyone's been like, oh, the Ronnie, and Omega, whatever, it's not this, we can't do that. But now it's like this very cliche thing has just become the thing. So why does he need to be found this way? Is this new Ronnie not the amoral scientist, but someone who genuinely believes in Omega's offering them something better? Or is she being manipulated, maybe herself, by some force even bigger than the Pantheon that we've been teased? Sort of the way she dismisses her classic scientific detachment for this weirdly grand, almost emotional crusade for Omega feels like the biggest misstep. And the thing that might actually be a clue to a deeper, perhaps even more worrying motivation that has me sort of really concerned, which is yet to be revealed. I'm really hoping that the reality war next week ties all of this together in a way that makes Wishworld stronger in retrospect. But right now, I'm a little disappointed. There you go. Now you know. And if knowing's half the battle, you're halfway to being a know-it-all yourself. What is the Know-It-All Index? Finally, no more preambles and other stuff for season 2, episode 7, Wishworld. Well, for now, Wishworld gets a 7 out of 10 from me. That could definitely change based on how this all kind of susses out in the end. Fingers crossed. Would love to hear what you think of Wishworld. Am I being too harsh? Is Mrs. Know-It-All right and I'm wrong? Like, let me know your theories in the comments below. Would absolutely love to hear that. Hear what you have to think about all of this for sure. So I feel like it's one of those things where we're going to find out more as we go and continue through all of this, and I hope you'll be here right along for that ride. Click like and subscribe, join the channel. We'd absolutely love to have you along for the ride. Until next time, never forget, everyone loves a know-it-all. Bye guys, we'll talk to you later.